Hey guys, it's Pedro back with another video covering Roster Mania. Now, of course, if you guys have already been following Roster Mania, particularly from my channel, you've already known about various moves that have come from different teams from different regions within the VCT landscape. And obviously, I've talked about the big players, I've talked about the unknown players, I've talked about the players that have moved on from tier 2 to tier 1. But for this occasion, I'm kind of gonna put a little bit of a spotlight towards one particular player, the type of player that everybody knows, and the type of player that everybody's kind of been following because of the situation that they're in. And of course, the player that I'm talking about is Aspas, the Brazilian duelist player that most recently was a part of Leviatan and helped him winning BCT America Stage 2 and also finished third place in VALORANT Champions 2024. Not just focusing on just his own particular role as a duelist, he has been looked at as one of the best players, and so far, one might say even the GOAT. Also, being a constant winner from the jump of his career, with the game still being young, it's no surprise that people are looking at him and being in that kind of territory, and so it just speaks to the level of greatness that Aspas has had, specifically in these early years of his career. Nevertheless, in recent days, weeks, I would say also months, we're in a position where we're in a very weird position where we might see Aspas, one of the best players in the world, be on the bench within the Leviatan camp due to how many twists and turns that there have been within his roster mania story. We've seen plenty of offers being made, plenty of anger brewing up between him and his old org slash team, and suitors getting cut from the tier 1 level due to their own circumstances slash malpractice. We got everything that I've said and then some, and so that's it. I'll just kind of give you guys a quick go over as to why we're in the current place that we're in. So in many ways, one can look at the start of this rift happening between Aspas and Leviatan to the start of 2024, in which Sheep Esports reported that Com came into a verbal agreement with the org to join them for 2024. And so that came off as a big surprise to everyone, including Aspas, and one that also brewed anger for him because, up to everyone's understanding and even his own, he believed that the team would go on with the likes of himself, Tex, King, Mazzino, and Noswer into 2024. Noswer is a big friend of his and one that he already knows and one that he felt he was going to play with for 2024, but due to Cobb suddenly being available and him kind of escaping from the evil genius's contract hell, as one would call it, Leviathan jumped at the opportunity of having a player like him, a recent world champion, and making that move happen. Obviously, it was a massive surprise when Com joined Leviathan, but it also was a massive surprise to Aspas, and so he kind of expected he was going to play with Nosworth. That wasn't going to happen, and he was going to have to play with Com. And according to a few reports at the time, he was very mad, more so specifically very angry about this. And nevertheless, he put that aside, worked with Com, worked with the rest of the team, and and made it work. Tried to make it work, and that's exactly what they kind of did. I'm going to show you guys the actual results itself, just for you guys to watch for visual purposes. And so they had a rough kickoff, losing to Sentinels at the deciding match of their group stage. Despite having plenty of expectations for the team coming into it and being looked at as an immediate winner, they didn't do that so far as the first event was concerned. They didn't make Masters Madrid as a result. They moved on to stage 1. Obviously performed better on the regular season. Crashed out a little bit in the playoffs. Still made it to Shanghai, but that was then they actually made their major crash out, not even making playoffs in China, and that thus paving the way for the org to make changes in the second stage of the year, and they booted out Gokid, the head coach, moved Iropada into the interim head coach role, and from that point, Levitan finally started meeting the expectations from the start of the year, winning stage 2, the entire thing there, and finishing third place in champions. And so, all in all, a pretty decent year, one that helped the team finish it on a rather satisfying note, and one that prompted fans, uh, people, analysts, even some people within the org to have this expectation that Leviatan would run it back, return with almost the same squad, and just try again at another champions. With that in mind, though, Aspas saw it best for him to leave the organization, and some reports were made, especially at the start of the off season, soon after champions, regarding the state of Leviatan. And one particular article that I kind of want to show you guys here from Brazil by Bruno Pavolario, V-Space, Brazilian esports journalist. It just kind of highlights how he became dissatisfied with his position within the organ. As this article says, he was basically essentially being ignored regarding his consultations and his advice to the org as to what they should do for 2025. He gave the org his suggestions to who they should look at as like their new as a new player, as a new coach. Who they should be the prime candidates, and Aspas gave his suggestions, gave his names as to who he wants to be with. Levitan didn't really listen to that. They went to another direction, and they made moves that I will eventually talk about later on in this video. One particular person that Aspas wanted to bring in regarding Leviatan for 2025 is Fraud. And Fraud is one that he is already familiar with. He was an analyst for Loud in Champions 2022, the one in which the team would eventually win. He stayed with the org, became the head coach in 2023, helped them win the inaugural VCT Americas League, and then finished third place overall in champions in Los Angeles. So they already had that camaraderie going. Aspas liked having Fraud around and having him by his side. And so obviously Aspas looked at Fraud as the next head coach, as his next head coach. Obviously that didn't happen. Instead, Leviatan promoted Iropada from the interim role onto the main official role. And so, of course, that kind of continued the animosity between Aspas and the org, more specifically for Aspas. And in a way, that enabled him to just say, you know what? I've seen these things happen, things that I don't really like, and so as a result, I'm just gonna leave. And so that's exactly what he did. And again, sticking with B Space, it reported that this Aspas decided to leave the organization at the end of 2023, at the end of 2024, despite having one more year in his contract. And so from that point, he decided to look at other offers that were on the table that were looking to acquire his services. And of course, we've seen plenty of organizations stumble over each other and just give out their offers for the player, because why wouldn't they? Of course, this is Aspas, the world's best player, one that has been at the top of his game throughout his entire career, lasting 3 years so far. And so who wouldn't want to have a badass player like Aspas? I certainly wouldn't if I was an executive for one of the tier 1 organizations. And so that's exactly what they did. And one of the organizations that kind of emerged as a potential destination for Aspas is Bleed. And Bleed Esports was one that already did the same story back at the end of 2023, in which they signed Ye to join them for their inaugural VCT Pacific season. They were looking to do the same thing again for Aspas for 2025, but obviously, as you guys already know, that didn't happen. Riot put out a statement at the early part of this month of October 2024, in which no, Bleed is out of VCT overall, and they would be replaced by Boom Esports. I've already talked about it. I've already highlighted it many times in this channel, so I won't go any further into that. The point is that it became fact, or became very certain at that point when Bleed was booted out of VCT, that he would join Bleed for 2025. So much so, in fact, that I have a tweet here. I want to show you guys again. I've already showed you guys in the first video that I did about Bleed, but just for this occasion, I'm going to do the same thing. By Purist, a known VALORANT insider roster move journalist, and he said that, quote, for what it's worth, I had been hearing for a bit that Aspas was in fact going to bleed, and that doesn't get any more clear than that. He was going to join bleed. Bleed was going to be able to pay the massive buyout that Leviatan had set in place for him, and they were going to, unlock him from the Leviatan contract jail and have him move over to Pacific. The question now comes into focus as to who's next. Who's going to be the org that will be able to pay off the buyout that Aspas has? Because remember, Leviathan had to pay a large amount, a large fee in order to bring in a player like Aspas, because uh, in esports, as you guys know, not every player is cheap, and for the very good players in particular, organizations have to pay the big bucks in order to have them come on board, and so that's exactly what Leviathan did. And in turn, they decided to install a large buyout, because why else would they pay a large amount of money and not have nothing to show for it at the end? Just having the player be with the team and then not having anything in return. It doesn't make sense for them financially speaking. So as a result, they decided to install that big buyout, and as a result, that kind of prompted the orgs that initially started asking for his services to then back off, and as that drew forth and the off season continued, it became reported that fewer and fewer teams were now calling on to Aspas, continuing the negotiations for his services. At this point of the off season, at the time of the recording, we got a lot of teams finalizing their rosters for 2025. Because normally this stuff gets finalized like roughly a few weeks into the offseason, not even waiting until the official start of the free agency period. A team goes into the conversation with different players that are looking for a way out. They go into verbal agreements, they finalize all of the things before actually putting pen into paper. And so that usually puts everything into a tailspin. And when you have a player like Aspas that is still looking for an org, roughly a few weeks into the official start of free agency period, then that comes into focus as to exactly who's going to be able to buy Aspas, who's going to be able to unlock Aspas from the Leviatan umbrella. And so, with that in mind, not many. There's still been no new reports. Basically, been silence as to who is in the running for Aspas. And so, while that's been going on, we got Leviatan doing their moves as well. And as I said, Edo Pato was promoted to the head coaching role for 2025. In addition to that, Mazzino parted ways with the team, finishing 1 year with that org, and they signed, most crucially, Demon One as the duelist. And Demon One as a duelist, with Demon One's arrival into Leviathan, that also comes into focus as to how Leviathan is going to be able to manage that role. And so, while many people have been talking about how Leviathan might do like the both players in the same team and just having them work it out, with Demon One maybe moving into another role or Aspas being the main duelist. That is not going to happen, because, as I said, Aspas expressed his disapproval. He didn't like what he had with Leviathan, and so it became a firm no for him to continue with Leviathan. And so that's it. Where does this leave us right now? Where do we have Aspas in this entire current moment in Rostermania? So far, Aspas has no team officially yet. He's not joined a new team in for 2025, and he's still waiting for an offer to come in, and one that that is appealing enough for him to accept. And so, as we continue into the off season, now we're getting into uncharted territory, which is having to wrestle with the thought of having a player like Aspas getting into the bench, not even playing any official matches. And that is a wild situation to put in, because, as I said, Aspas, best player in the world, and he's been able to do that for the past 3 years. And so, to have that happen, in which Aspas doesn't have a team and he's not probably not be gonna be able to start off on the official server at the start of 2025 is absolutely wild to me in a sense. But nevertheless, to Aspas's point, why would he stick with Leviatan, in which they have time and time again said no to his suggestions, made sudden moves that he didn't really like, struggled to meet his constant demands. And you look at it on the other side of the spectrum, you got Levitan, in which they basically did everything they could in order to appease a player like Aspas. They brought him over. They been able to meet the demands that he has had of them, and to have that kind of be taken away from them in the form of Aspas deciding to move away from them for 2025, then of course, I mean, it's the kind of thing that happens in esports in which two parties don't come into agreement and they part ways. And so normally they would be able to find different destinations, but in the case of this one, we're still in a bit of a limbo in which Aspas was still in the same org with the sole intention of having to move out at the first opportunity, and the org having to uh, move on, field a new team, and having to do so while understanding that they have no place for a player like Aspas. And so, and in addition to the fact is that by the time this video has been, by the time this report was made, practically all of the teams have finalized their rosters, and it becomes all the more difficult for Aspas to look for a team in which they still have a vacancy. And I don't know, man. It's just tough to grasp. Nevertheless, the regarding the podcast to Aspas potentially being in the bench and not playing at all for 2025, in response to the most recent report that was made by VSpace, uh, Aspas's agent Jerome Copez took to Twitter/X and quoted the report that was made by Bruno/VSpace, talking about where things stand with Aspas and stuff like that. And so he kind of said that if such circumstances continue to remain the same in the form of Aspas not being able to be in the team, and the chances of him staying at Leviatan increases, then he and Aspas made it clear to the org that he would continue to play. He will still be able to play for the org uh, and be in the starting lineup. It'd basically be the same thing as in the end of 2024, in which he would put things aside throughout the season. He would play with the team and try to make things work. Furthermore, the agent discussed about where exactly Aspas would like to be in for 2025, and he mentioned ideally his destination would be Asia, either in VCT Pacific or in VCT China. I mean, in Americas, he'd already been there, done that, played with Loud for many years, or basically for many years, played with Leviathan, been in Americas for his entire journey. But he's one that, as it shows in this tweet, would like to tackle new challenges and go to different regions while also remaining, while also having the drive to be competitive in mind. And so that isn't to say that Aspas is only looking for teams within those two regions. Uh, it's also been known that he'd like to go into any team, in any region, in EMEA included, provided that the right things are in place for him to join and also be in. So we got one team that is looking to move on from a player that they had in this past season. We got that same player looking at the moves that the team did, not even listening to his suggestions, not even listening to his input, and deciding to part ways from that team. And we got ourselves a situation where we got two avenues going at different directions, and the likelihood of them kind of returning back in one is very slim, basically slim to none. And such as a result of the things that I talked about that led us to here. And so we just have to see what happens next for Aspas and Leviatan, and what exactly both parties do in the future. And so that said, this has been Pedro. We're talking about Aspas, talking about roster mania once again, and I'll see you guys on the next one.